My husband accused me of swapping our baby at the hospital because of a blood type. He even filed for a DNA test behind my back. But when the results came in, they said he wasn't the father, and that's when everything unraveled. What we discovered next was something no one saw coming. Watch until the end. The truth is stranger and more painful than fiction. Hi. My name is Lena, and 3 months ago, I gave birth to my son, Noah. It was the most painful, overwhelming, emotional moment of my life, but also, I thought, the happiest. I'd spent 9 months imagining what it would be like to finally hold him, to watch my husband cry tears of joy beside me, to bring him home and start this new chapter together. But none of that happened. Daniel didn't cry when Noah was born. He barely looked at him. I thought maybe he was overwhelmed, or in shock. Some dads freeze up, right? I didn't want to make a big deal of it. I was still shaky from the delivery, hormones flying everywhere, trying to latch Noah for the first time. I gave him space. The first red flag came the night we got home from the hospital. Daniel sat across the room, watching me rock Noah in the glider. He didn't offer to help. Didn't smile. Just sat there, like he was observing a stranger. When I asked if he wanted to hold him, he hesitated, like I'd just offered him a dead bird. "I'm tired," he muttered. "Maybe tomorrow." That maybe tomorrow turned into a pattern. He'd leave early for work. Come home late. Avoid diaper duty. Flinch when Noah cried. I caught him watching YouTube videos about postpartum depression in men, and I felt a flicker of sympathy. Maybe that was it. Postpartum anxiety. It happens. I told him it was okay, that we could talk about it, go to therapy. But then, 2 weeks in, he sat me down and said the words that shattered everything. "Lena, are you sure that's our baby?" I blinked. I thought it was a joke. A bad one. I actually laughed. "What are you talking about?" He didn't smile. His face was pale and flat. "I've been doing some reading. His blood type is AB. You're A. I'm O. That's not possible. Genetically. Look it up." I stared at him. I didn't even know Noah's blood type yet. It wasn't something I had asked. "Where did you get that from?" I asked the nurse during your recovery. She said it was on the chart. I remembered it. I looked it up. I told him he must have gotten it wrong. Blood type inheritance isn't always simple. There are recessive traits, complex genetics. But Daniel had already made up his mind. "I'm not saying you cheated," he said, with that infuriating tone people use when they are saying something but pretending not to. "I'm saying maybe the hospital made a mistake. Switched babies. Or something." I told him that was ridiculous. We never let Noah out of our sight. He stayed in our room, not in the nursery. I was clutching him half the time, even when I was too sore to move. There was no mix-up. But Daniel just kept staring at Noah like he was some kind of puzzle. Like he was waiting for the kid to morph into someone else. A few days later, I found out he'd told his mother. That's when things got worse. Daniel's mother, Evelyn, had never liked me. From day one, she looked at me like I was temporary, like I'd tricked her son into marrying down. She hated that I didn't grow up in the same upscale zip code, didn't go to one of those schools, and worst of all, that I didn't need her approval to live my life. So when Daniel told her his theory, that Noah might not be his baby, she latched onto it like a starving dog. She came over uninvited one morning, holding a casserole dish like it was some peace offering, and the first words out of her mouth were, "He has strange eyes, doesn't he?" I froze. What? Noah. His eyes. They're not like Daniel's. Not like yours, either. You sure they didn't give you the wrong baby in that chaotic hospital? I read it happens all the time. It was so casual, so rehearsed, like she'd been practicing that line in the mirror. I kicked her out. Daniel was at work or pretending to be, and when I told him what she said, he defended her. "She's just worried, Lena. She didn't mean it that way." She absolutely did. She said he had strange eyes. Like he's some alien. Daniel shrugged. I mean, they are kind of odd. Almost grayish. No one in my family has gray eyes. I wanted to scream. Baby's eyes change. They start off light and shift over time. But there he was, picking apart our son like a used car he wasn't sure about buying. I called my OB the next day. Asked her to explain blood type inheritance in simple terms. She confirmed what I already suspected: it's not as straightforward as Daniel's amateur Googling made it seem. She said I should bring him in, maybe speak to a genetic counselor together. But Daniel refused. Said he didn't need a lecture from some hospital shill. He was convinced there'd been a switch. And worse, he thought I might be in on it. That's when he started going behind my back. I found an email on his laptop. He'd left it open while grabbing a shower, sent to the hospital's administration, titled, Urgent, Potential Infant Mix-Up. He was requesting access to video surveillance, nurse logs, even asking for the name of the phlebotomist who tagged Noah's samples. I felt like I was being investigated. Like I was guilty of something, only I didn't know what. When I confronted him, his voice was cold. I'm not accusing you, he said. I just need to know. If he's ours, then great. But if he's not, we have the right to find out. The right? I repeated. Do you hear yourself? That's your son, Daniel. You held him. You cut his cord. You named him. His eyes didn't flinch. Names can be changed. I spent the rest of that night holding Noah and crying. Not because of what Daniel said, but because of how easy it was for him to say it. 2 days later, a letter arrived. A formal acknowledgement from the hospital. They were opening an internal review. Daniel had filed a legal complaint. He wasn't just suspicious, he was escalating it. I was humiliated. Devastated. And I knew right then I had to get ahead of this before he tore our lives apart. That's when I made the appointment with the pediatric geneticist. Getting a referral to a pediatric geneticist wasn't easy, especially without Daniel's signature on any of the forms. But after a long, desperate phone call and some paperwork gymnastics, I got Noah in for a consultation under the pretense of needing a second opinion for unexplained blood type discrepancies. The office was quiet, clinical, and cold, the kind of place that made you feel like you were either about to get answers or have your entire world cracked open. Dr. Mehta was calm and curious. She had a soft way of speaking that made me feel like I wasn't crazy, like maybe, just maybe, this nightmare had a scientific explanation. She asked to see both of our medical records, including the preliminary paternity test Daniel had pushed for, one he hadn't told me he'd already initiated using a mail-in cheek swab kit. That detail made her eyebrows raise. I don't trust those kits in complex cases, she said. They're fine for basic questions. But genetics is messy. Especially when rare conditions are involved. She drew blood from Noah and me first. Then she asked, gently, if Daniel would be willing to come in for more accurate testing. I told her there was no way. He already thought this was a conspiracy. If I brought him here, he'd accuse me of trying to rig the results. She nodded, like she'd heard that story before. Then she asked me a strange question. Has your husband ever had any unusual medical findings? Conflicting blood types on old records? Organ transplant history? Fertility issues? No, I said. He's never even had stitches. Why? Dr. Mehta leaned back. Because when cheek swab DNA doesn't match a biological child, but the story doesn't line up, sometimes it points to chimerism. Chimerism? I repeated. Like, two people in one? She smiled slightly. In a way, yes. It happens when someone absorbs their twin in the womb. You can end up with two distinct sets of DNA in your body. Usually, one dominates, but not always. There have been documented cases where a man's sperm carries DNA that's completely different from the DNA in his skin or saliva. If your husband is a chimera, his mail-in cheek swab could easily show that he's not Noah's father, even if he is. My head spun. I'd never even heard of this condition before. And now it was possibly the missing puzzle piece that could prove everything? She offered to order a deeper analysis, one that compared Noah's DNA to both my blood and Daniel's prior samples from the hospital records. It would take time. Specialized labs. But she said it could reveal whether Daniel truly was Noah's biological father, regardless of what any over-the-counter test claimed. I left that office clinging to hope. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I had an anchor, something solid that could stop the swirl of accusations, whispers, and doubts. Meanwhile, Daniel grew more distant. He was sleeping in the guest room by then, still emailing the hospital, still talking to lawyers about custody if things went south. I didn't even recognize him anymore. When the DNA test results arrived in the mail a week later, he opened them without telling me. Just walked into the living room with the paper in his hand and said flatly, "It's negative. Says I'm not the father." He watched my face, waiting for panic. But I didn't panic. I just stood up, walked past him, and grabbed the folder Dr. Mehta had mailed me earlier that day. Inside was a full report. Lab certified. Triple checked. It said this. While the paternity test based on buccal swab suggests non-paternity, genetic comparison using alternate tissue samples confirms that the child is biologically related to the subject. Subject exhibits characteristics consistent with tetragametic chimerism. Translation? Daniel was Noah's father. But he carried two sets of DNA, and the wrong one had been tested. I handed Daniel the folder. He took it like it was radioactive. Flipped through the pages without really reading them, his eyes skimming over the terms: chimerism, tetragametic, alternate tissue conformation. He looked confused. Defensive. "So, you're saying I am the father?" he asked slowly. "No," I said. "I'm not saying it. The science is. The hospital is. The lab is. Everyone but you has been saying it." He stared at the report like it had betrayed him. "You don't understand," he said. "When I saw that first result, the one that said I wasn't the father, I felt like everything collapsed. I didn't want to believe it. But I couldn't stop thinking, what if it's true? What if I've been raising another man's child?" I stood there in disbelief. "You haven't been raising him. You've barely touched him." Daniel's jaw tensed. "Don't turn this around on me. I did what anyone would do. I followed the evidence." "No. You followed your fears. And you let them poison everything." He paced the room, breathing heavily. "You have no idea what it's like to look at your own kid and feel like a stranger. To think your wife might have betrayed you. To have your own mother asking questions you're too scared to say out loud." I froze. "Your mother?" I asked. So this was all her idea? The test? The emails? The complaint? She didn't make me do anything. She just encouraged me to be sure. I felt sick. She encouraged you to think I was a liar. A cheater. A baby thief. He said nothing. Just stood there holding the folder like it might bite him. I waited for him to apologize. To admit he was wrong. To say anything that resembled remorse. But all he said was, "So, what now? You want me to pretend none of this happened?" I laughed, sharp, bitter. "No, Daniel. I want you to remember exactly what happened. I want you to remember that you accused me of the unthinkable. That you dragged our names through hospital records and legal filings. That you let your mother call our son strange and imply I'd swapped babies like some kind of criminal." He was silent. Still reading the paper like he thought it might change. So I gave him something else to read, the envelope I'd been keeping in the kitchen drawer. He opened it. His eyes skimmed the header. "Petition for divorce, filed with the county clerk." He looked up at me, stunned. "You're divorcing me?" "Yes," I said. "Because this isn't about science anymore. It's about trust. And you lost that the moment you chose suspicion over love." He sputtered. Lena, I didn't know. I didn't mean. You didn't want to know, I interrupted. You wanted to be right more than you wanted to be a father. Noah stirred in the bassinet nearby, letting out a soft coo. Daniel looked over, then quickly away like he still couldn't bear to face him. I picked Noah up and pressed him close. He curled against me instantly, his warmth grounding me, reminding me what mattered. I won't keep you from seeing him, I said quietly. But don't expect me to forget what you did. He didn't follow me when I walked out of the room. He didn't say a word. He just sat there holding the truth in his hands, and realizing it had come too late, I moved out 2 days later. I didn't wait for a court order or an official custody hearing. I didn't yell, or cry, or throw anything. I just packed up what Noah and I needed and left Daniel sitting in a house that felt emptier than the day we brought our son home. My best friend, Karina, let me move into her spare bedroom without hesitation. She helped me carry in boxes, sterilize bottles, and rock Noah when my arms went numb. She didn't ask for the full story. She didn't need to. One look at my face and she knew everything had changed. The day after I filed the custody motion, Daniel called. I let it ring. He texted me after. Just 2 words, I'm sorry. Not I was wrong. Not I want to make this right. Just that limp, gutless apology tossed into the silence like it could undo the damage. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on building something new. A life where my son was loved, protected, and never questioned for existing. Karina was a rock. She even found a parenting group for single moms in the neighborhood. At first, I didn't want to go, I felt ashamed. Like I'd failed before Noah had even learned to crawl. But I forced myself. And it helped. Hearing other women talk about betrayal, about navigating custody, about standing up for themselves, it reminded me I wasn't alone. Meanwhile, Daniel lawyered up. At first, he claimed he didn't want full custody, just equal access and a say in Noah's medical care. But as the court dates approached, his tone changed. He started throwing around phrases like parental alienation and mental instability. He submitted screenshots of old arguments, twisted and taken out of context, to paint me as emotionally reactive. It was surreal. Like I was watching him become someone else in real time. But then, I did something he didn't expect. I submitted the full genetic report to the court. I made sure every page was included. The chimerism diagnosis. The dual DNA findings. The pediatric analysis confirming that Noah was his biological child, despite the flawed paternity test he'd used to launch this whole nightmare. My lawyer presented it calmly. Unemotionally. Like we weren't talking about the reason my marriage had detonated in slow motion. Daniel's lawyer tried to argue that it was unreasonable for me to act before seeking a second test. That I had escalated the situation by refusing to wait for clarification. But the judge didn't buy it. She read the report in silence, then looked directly at Daniel and said, "It appears your actions were based on incomplete science and a lack of trust in your spouse. That is not a basis for questioning paternity, that is a basis for therapy." In the end, he got visitation rights. Supervised, at first. And only once a week. Noah's too young to understand any of this yet. But I can already tell he knows who loves him. He lights up when I walk into the room. He reaches for me before anyone else. He doesn't flinch when Karina holds him, or when other moms pass him around at our meetups. But the one time Daniel held him at the supervised visit last weekend, Noah cried the moment I stepped away. It broke my heart. And it told me everything I needed to know. I won't stop Daniel from being in his son's life. But I won't let him rewrite history either. He didn't just doubt me. He abandoned me when I needed him most. And now he's learning what it means to be a father. From the outside looking in, the weeks blurred together in a pattern of court dates, lawyer calls, and endless bottles and diapers. Each night, after Noah finally fell asleep, I'd lie awake in Karina's spare bed, replaying everything. Wondering when exactly I'd stopped recognizing the man I married. Wondering if I'd ever really known him at all. I tried to keep things civil. Daniel sent short, clipped emails about visitation, never more than a few sentences. He didn't ask about Noah's milestones, his first laugh, the way he rolled over for the first time on Karina's living room rug, or how he liked to fall asleep with his fist curled in my shirt. When we handed Noah off at the supervised visits, Daniel kept his eyes on the floor. He brought his mother once. I caught her glaring at me, like this was all some elaborate scheme I'd pulled off just to spite her. The court ordered us into mediation, for Noah's sake. The mediator asked Daniel what he wanted, and he said, "I want to be a father." But when she asked him what that meant, he couldn't answer. He just looked at his hands, silent. After the session, my lawyer advised me, stay calm. Stick to facts. Let the paperwork speak for itself. So I did. I gave the mediator every scrap of evidence, emails, text messages, the genetic report. I refused to let Daniel's doubts rewrite reality. One night, after another long, silent visit, Daniel stopped me in the parking lot. He looked tired. Hollowed out. He said, "I know you hate me, Lena. But I really did believe those tests. I couldn't help it." I stared at him, searching for something: remorse, hope, understanding. "You could have listened to me. You could have trusted me. But you didn't." He opened his mouth to reply, then closed it again. He looked so small in that moment, like a man who'd finally realized what he'd lost. "I want to be better," he said. "For Noah." I nodded. "Then start by believing in him. And in yourself." Back at Karina's, I let myself cry. For the marriage I'd lost. For the years I'd spent loving someone who, when faced with doubt, chose suspicion over faith. For the son who deserved better than all of this. But as the weeks passed, I got stronger. Noah's giggles replaced the ache in my chest. Karina and the other moms became my tribe. I learned to ask for help, to celebrate small victories, to savor the weight of my son asleep on my shoulder. The divorce became official on a rainy Thursday. The judge signed off on our custody arrangement. Noah would live with me, Daniel would get supervised visits for the next year, with a review after. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not happy, not yet. But free. I strapped Noah into his car seat, kissed his tiny forehead, and whispered, "It's just you and me, kid." And for the first time since this all began, I actually believed we'd be okay. I thought freedom would feel like some grand, movie-ending moment, sun shining, pain behind me, everything suddenly making sense. The truth is, it was quieter than that. It was the steady rhythm of Noah's breath against my chest at night, the gentle chaos of mornings in Karina's kitchen, the slow, stubborn return of hope. A month after the divorce was finalized, Daniel sent me a long email. It was the first time he'd tried to explain, really explain, since all this began. He wrote, "I keep reading the report. I keep thinking about everything I did. I wish I could say I'd do it differently if I had another chance. But I honestly don't know. I panicked. I let mom get in my head. I was scared of being a father, of not measuring up. I'm sorry for all of it." He said he'd started therapy. He wanted to learn how to be present, to be trustworthy, not for me, but for Noah. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't beg for a second chance. For the first time, he sounded like a man facing himself, not just blaming everyone else. I read the message twice, then put my phone away. I still had a life to build. At our next court-ordered visit, Daniel seemed different. He didn't flinch when Noah fussed. He didn't look to me for instructions. He sat quietly, letting Noah babble and drool on his shirt, his hands gentle but uncertain. It was awkward, but it wasn't cold. Evelyn stopped coming. Maybe she finally realized there was nothing left for her to poison. At home, I framed Noah's hospital bracelet and the geneticist's letter. Not as trophies, but as reminders. I survived this. I kept my son safe. I trusted myself, even when everyone else doubted me. Karina's apartment became our haven. She'd watch Noah while I started job interviews, cheered me on as I slowly rebuilt my savings, teased me until I laughed at my own messy, beautiful chaos. People told me I was strong. Sometimes I believed them. But the real truth? I was just a mother who refused to let suspicion win. I was someone who decided, when pushed into a corner, to fight for my truth, no matter how many people tried to rewrite it. Daniel still sees Noah once a week. Sometimes, he even smiles. I hope, one day, my son will know the whole story, not the bitterness, but the lesson at its heart. That trust is fragile. That love is a choice, every single day. That sometimes, the people who should protect us are the ones who need to learn what family truly means. I don't know what the future holds. But I know Noah will grow up safe, certain of who he is, and surrounded by people who will never doubt him. And that's enough.